Let's review some of the sounds we can get out of this preset. I have this set now to just output the first subharmonic. On Continue Mini. On Osmos an octave down. So now we'll see what we can do with each of the oscillator voices. We can apply a little self-modulation. Apply too much, we'll go into the noise. Or apply spectral balance, timbre adjustment. They can get a similar sound, or you can apply them both together. Now we can also apply some shape generator based noise with an attack profile controlled by the noise speed. If I set the speed up, the noise will only come in as the shape generator has run its course. And I can set that pretty fast so that the noise, if I set it low enough, really just becomes another timbre component. And those adjustments can be done on all the voices. Let's take the noise off. Now let's start bringing in some of the subharmonics. Here I have them set so the first, second, third, and fourth subharmonics will be brought in as I bring up the output level. The second subharmonic will be an octave down. And let's bring in the third subharmonic now. And we'll bring in the fourth subharmonic. We have to be careful bringing in too high a subharmonic on a low note because you could get a frequency that's either beating or even out of the hearing range. So I set things up a couple octaves on this so that you can play in a normal range and hear a full spectrum of subharmonics. What we can also do is change the oscillator type on each of these. Actually, oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 change oscillator type together, and oscillator 3 and 4 change type together. I just didn't have enough space on the GUI to add an individual one per voice, but this works well. So here's the DSF. Add a little bit of timbre adjustment on the voices. Let's change the DSF type now to phase sum 7. We can change that to the phase triangle option. And you can hear it's a little more triangle-y. You'll notice the modulation disappears when I change to the phase generator options. I programmed that in because there's no modulation input to the phase generators. If I set those back to DSF, now my modulation will come back in. Now I can bring in the main oscillator. And that I can change octave doublings on because it's a wave bank that I have 3 separate waves that I can change the frequencies of. Octave down, octave up and down, back to just a unison with the other voices. And now I'll bring in the side oscillator. And that one that has similar characteristics to the main, but this one I can detune. And I can bring up just a bass noise on the oscillators. put a little bit of that on to add to the timbre. And that is the oscillator section. This can be run independently of the filter section if you want. Let me just remove the oscillators going into the filter bank. No effects are on that because I turned the recirculator off on the oscillator module because we want all the effects to be applied on the filter and effects processor. Now let's look at the filter module. We set things back to a harmonic setting of 1, 2, 3, 4. And now let's bring up the filter section where we have 4 filters set to low pass, where we can set them to band pass as well if we like. The cascading can be changed from 12 to 24 to 36 to 48 dB an octave. Input level can be changed for each of the filter inputs. And of course, you have your cutoff frequency and resonance settings that you can set to your liking. Let's quickly change that to band pass. Of course, when we set the band pass, we are setting a specific band filter setting, so the output will be lower. Set back to low pass. Let's set cascading to 48, see what that sounds like. Set it back to 12. So you can see we can get nice fine gradations in timbre this way with this parallel 4 filter formant-like approach. Now we can also set a sweep frequency on here. Let's do that. We'll set individual sweep frequencies, then we'll turn on sweep. I'm pressing fully down now and it's sweeping to 0. Of course, if I want to have a longer sweep, I can. Or if I want a really quick sweep, and I can change the shape of my sweep. Let's make it a little slower so we can hear that a little better. There's a triangle shape. Let's set it to pulse with a quicker setting. And if I want, I can select this sync on sweep function I put in that will allow you to basically set all your sweep frequencies in parallel to the same amount. And I can set a Y sweep to impose it manually. Now I can set a release with a blended persistence, where if I bring that up, you can hear, if I bring it up more and just play a note quickly, you can hear the sustain function coming in if I take that off. So that's a nice way to add a little bit of envelope shaping to the sound. And finally, we can bring in our LFO, set a width and a speed. For basically that tremolo that we add. And that's the filter section. We can also change the filter input and output, modify the amplitude of the input to the filter, modify the audio input level, modify the output from the filter, and also modify our post gain in this menu. Now let's review the effects menu, which is part of the filter and effects module. This has a section for the recirculator, and I can turn that off or on. Here it's on. Let's turn it off. You can hear that's turned off. Well, maybe you want to put your own effects processor on this. You can do that by turning off the recirculator. We'll turn it back on. You can change any of the normal recirculator settings. Let's, for example, change from the short reverb to a swept echo. Or we could change to analog echo. And here's the new long reverb. The reverbs have been optimized and improved in the new firmware. We'll set that back to short reverb. You can set your tilt EQ, your compression, anything you can do in the editor, you can now do in your overlay, because the entire editor interface has been exposed for you in this new overlay interface. Let's bring up the program delay. We have a dual tap delay we added. We'll bring up the delay input for that, and we'll set the taps so that the first tap percentage is quite quick coming in, and the second tap is quite long. Now we'll set the two tap outputs. We can set them individually, and we'll play a note. And you don't hear much difference because the delay time is set to only 50 milliseconds. Let's set that to a value where we can hear the delay. Can you hear that? Ba-dum-bum, ba-dum-bum. That's because we have two taps set, and the first tap is quick coming in, the second tap is longer coming in. The first note is my note I'm playing, and then the taps come in. Let me set the two taps to be kind of the same. Now the taps are set to be about equal. And you're just going to hear a bump, 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 because the two taps are coming in at the same time. One of the great things about using a tap delay. There I set them a little differently, and you can hear that almost rhythmic delay processing happening. Now let's set some feedback. A lot you can do with the delay. You could combine that with the change, say with the swept echo, to get some really nice, strange effect. Well, we'll turn the delay off, because now let's play around with convolution. There's our bass tone. Let's bring up the convolution mix. You can hear a change in timbre as we add convolution, and we can then bring up the convolution index, which will interpolate between one of the four convolutions that we can set. And these convolutions have a lot new options added in the new firmware. Here's a leather option, metal damped, nylon cloth, and some convolutions that are based on the Ondes and Pyramid resonators. If we take our index back to the beginning, so the resonator will be applied. So convolution, really nice new features. I can play around with the gain settings here, attenuation and pre-gain for the filter and effects module, and I can also apply some percentage of direct audio input going to the output. Turn on a little bit of direct. You can hear it really bumped in volume there because I'm sending that input direct to output. And finally, I give you some predefined configurations where you can just press one, and here, for example, this is using subharmonics 2, 5, 7, and 9. Those are going to be lower. This should have a much larger bass response. Again, get too low and you're going to start applying on the higher subharmonics frequencies that will beat, and maybe you won't even be able to hear them. You can go in and change the levels of these. Let's try another one, say 1, 3, 7, 10. There we go. We can set our attenuations to be in reverse order, and of course that will emphasize the bass. So much fun playing around with this interface. These allow you to set some combinations that only have the subharmonics output, subharmonics with the main oscillator, and subharmonics main and side oscillators. Here's one that adds all of them with some side oscillator detuning. Wow, an amazing number of parameters that can be changed now with this overlay interface. You can create a full-fledged synthesizer with 50 or more controls, as you can see here, using this new overlay function. But don't worry, if you're not a programmer and you don't know how to create EaganMatrix presets, the goal here is to make these overlays available to the general community. I know Hawken Audio is working on some. I'll make mine available that I do, and I have to assume that Expressive E is also going to be coming out with some of these as well. So next video we'll look at how to program a preset to expose all of this interface to an overlay, and then we'll look at the fine details of programming up the overlay itself.